All right, let's welcome back to Straight Fire NFL insider, NFL Network star. He's been working his butt off for like 4 or 5 months. Tom Pelissero. Tom, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. It was a great week in Green Bay, Jason. I can't say enough about how the people there did putting together the draft. I'm always concerned with just like the logistics of it and the smoothness of the operation. The people there couldn't be nicer and more informed. There were no getting lost in the labyrinth of the draft footprint. So it was really impressive. It was a good week. Could have dealt without a little of that sideways rain on Friday, but other than that, it was pretty good.
Sideways rain. Yeah, it seemed like a fun time, but I got to be honest. Your whole 2025 is basically what? Senior Bowl, combine, traveling to pro days, getting ready for the. I mean, it's been listen. We're not here out here digging ditches. We're talking about football, but it's been a bit of a rough 4 or 5 months. Huh? Just tough. A lot of travel.
I would say, yeah, the travel part of it. Everybody's always like, after the Super Bowl, they're like, "Oh man, aren't you happy to be done?" I'm like, actually, like the next 3 months there's only 2 weeks until the combine. Then a week after that is free agency. Then like 2 weeks after that's the owners meeting, and then you're directly into the draft prep. It's funny because like every year over the course of time, like I'll schedule things, right? It's like every dentist appointment, doctor appointment, talking to my financial advisor, and then I'll open up my Google Calendar after the draft. I'm like, oh man, I got like 7 meetings this week. So I
Yeah.
do nothing for 9 months, and now we're back, baby.
Yeah, we're back. So let me ask you, it's been a rough 4 months. You've been on the road a lot traveling. And the biggest story out of the draft, and I'm sure some people are sick of it, but Shedeur Sanders, and it did propel ratings. TV ratings were massive for the draft. Um, I just have to ask, over the last 4 or 5 months, did you see any of this coming? I mean, fifth round, Tom?
I didn't see fifth round. I did see and tried to frankly brace people for the fact that there was a decent chance that Shedeur Sanders was not going to go in the first round. Really by the time we got to draft day, it was down to the Giants or the Steelers. Those were the only two teams that really could keep Shedeur in the first. When he slid out of the first, I thought he would go on day two. I was
Mhm.
surprised that he did not. I think it's more so, Jason, if you rewind and go back, and this happens sometimes where there is a media narrative that's created that maybe is not accurate relative to the feeling within the league. And what I'm pointing to there is, there were certainly, some of the foremost draft experts, right? Mel Kiper's the godfather of this. He's been doing it forever. He had Shedeur number one all the way on his quarterback list. Our guy, Bucky Brooks, had Shedeur number one. And those guys, they watch way more tape than I do. They're
Yeah.
entitled to their opinions every year. But I think that it created this idea that this was a two-horse race with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. When really, even going into the combine, when I talked with people, it was Cam Ward is clearly QB1. The real race is going to be for QB2.
Mm.
And I think to understand how that entire thing played out, you have to go back even further. I had a conversation Friday night, right after round three. It was like midnight. I get a phone call from a GM who's thinking about taking Shedeur on Saturday in rounds 4 through 7. And I asked him just like, how is this possible though that he could have slid this far? And he pointed all the way back to, I believe it was February or March of 2024. So over a
Oh,
year before the draft, when Deion Sanders goes on a podcast and talks about, talking about Shedeur and Travis Hunter. If somebody takes them, I don't want to go to. We're gonna pull an Eli, right? We're just not gonna go, and we're gonna force the issue here. And that's kind of how Shedeur went through the pre-draft process. It's a series of touch points, right? Where every team, it's not just they've watched the game film, but they've done background. Their area scouts have gone through a year in advance and done homework on guys. They're gathering all the background information. They're obviously dissecting the tape. You go into the process, and then from All-Star game season to the combine to the pro days to private visits and all that, you try to fill in the gaps, right? You try to fill in the blanks. Well, with Shedeur, he didn't make it any easier to fill in those gaps. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl. He chose to go to the East West Shrine Bowl because it was in Dallas. Despite
wait,
it,
hold on, Tom. Let me jump in. So, in the last like 5 years, can you think of any quarterback in his position that also skipped the Senior Bowl that was kind of relevant? Like, I don't remember. Was Justin Herbert? Did he go to the Senior Bowl or?
Justin Herbert won the MVP of the Senior Bowl. Baker Mayfield only showed up for a day. And that was kind of the same thing, which Baker Mayfield showed up. He wasn't in the greatest mood. He was only there for a day and then left. And there
He
was
thought
real
he was like above
conversation
it.
about Baker Mayfield at that time as well. But for Shedeur, he goes to the East West Shrine Bowl. There's an NFL memo saying if you go to these All-Star games, you have to practice. He
Oh,
doesn't practice. He goes to the combine, and it's now well documented that some of his interviews went really poorly. There are
yeah.
both the formal interviews and the informal interactions that can occur there. You get to March, the whole Big 12 has their joint pro day in Dallas. He doesn't do anything there. He shows up, but he doesn't do anything. They have their showcase at Colorado. I mean, the Giants, for instance, put a ton of homework into him. They were at every open practice, they went to every game, they had him on a private visit, they went to the showcase. I mean, they did everything here, and they did a private workout like a week before the draft. So they had as much information as anyone, and they decided to go with Jackson Dart. And the issue,
Yeah.
the issue then becomes like we can debate the talent between these guys, but what happens is for a lot of teams philosophically, if you think a guy's a starter, you take him in the first,
Yeah.
right? You go and get him. It doesn't really matter the value. You take him in the first. If you're taking a backup, you're probably not doing that until day 3. And then for even some of those teams that might have had Shedeur as the player evaluation, and he's the name that's like sticking out that's above all the other remaining guys at the board, by not taking the opportunities with all those touch points with some of these other teams that may not have been the teams Shedeur wanted to go to or the teams he thought would be in play for him, it made it harder maybe for some of those GMs to take the leap. And so in the end, he ends up being the second quarterback taken by a team that did have a lot of time with him. In the Browns, he goes in the 5th and ends up, frankly, in maybe the best situation. If he wants to get on the field in 2025, when you look at all this in its totality, he ends up in a spot in Cleveland where he's legitimately going to have an opportunity to come in and compete.
Really? So you think, despite them having 5 quarterbacks on the roster, we can make it 4 since Watson, had the
Probably not going to
Achilles
play.
and he's probably not going to be ready. But they traded, I believe, a 5th for Pickett. Flacco, we know Stefanski knows the system, and they drafted Dylan Gabriel ahead of Shedeur. So you think Shedeur still has a shot to start any games next season?
Well, if you think of the names you just listed there, Jason, I don't know that you sit there and go, boy, we're really comfortable with that being the guy. I mean,
Fair.
you're right. They've got, they have guaranteed money, not a lot, but some invested in Flacco. Pickett, they gave up a 5, like you mentioned. Dylan Gabriel, they drafted in the 3rd. Shedeur was obviously rated lower than Dylan Gabriel on their board, but why not? Let's talk about Shedeur the player because so
Yeah.
much of the focus has been on Shedeur. And I don't even think it was so much like the personality. He's not nobody sits there and says like he's a bad guy or he's a party guy. Like he
Yeah.
wants to be great. He wants to come in. He's all ball. He wants to be a really, really good football player. He's got accuracy. He's got toughness, despite again all the different things. And he's not, his backstory is different than everybody else. Teammates really like him. That's the thing that you heard out of the school when scouts went in there, which is teammates seem to have his back. But it comes down to he's not the biggest guy. He doesn't have the biggest arm. He's not an elite athlete like his dad. And he has this freewheeling play style where he makes so much happen outside of structure and it's not on time. And so the projection as a player, again, setting aside all the other stuff, the projection as a player was, is he going to be able to adjust his game and play on time, play in rhythm? I know there's been people have made comparisons to Drew Brees. Well, Drew Brees was one of the best ever. See it and get the ball out of your hand. With Shedeur, he's very cool, calm, and collected in the pocket. But how many of his highlights are him backpedaling and exiting the back of the pocket and extending it and then just throwing the ball up to Travis Hunter? It's going to be harder because he's not a Kyler Murray level athlete, a Josh Allen level athlete to make those plays happen in the NFL. And so that's part of the projection too. And so let's see, he goes in with Kevin Stefanski, who is now, they're very much going to run Kevin's offense, which is timing based. Let's see what type of progress
Yeah.
Shedeur can make. Dylan Gabriel is the more natural fit in terms of his play
Mm.
style, but Dylan Gabriel is like, my size. He's got a few extra pounds on him, but like he's 5'10", and he's shown that he can function on that. But that's below the line for a lot of people, especially because he's not a runner. He's not a scrambler like Kyler Murray. He is going to play in rhythm. He's like a mini Tua is what Dylan Gabriel is. So between
Mm.
him, Joe Flacco, who's 41, I think,
Yeah.
and didn't play great when he got his opportunity last year with the Colts, and then Kenny Pickett, who is now on his 3rd team, and quite possibly if things don't go his way, his 4th soon. You don't have a lot of certainty here. So let's see. It'll be fascinating to see how Kevin Stefanski divides the reps because you just don't have that many to give 4 guys a ton of reps
Yeah.
here. But I understand the philosophy too. As much as it's an odd situation, like your philosophy is, hey, once you get past those first round guys, and there was only one quarterback, Cam Ward, profiled as a surefire starter. you're just kind of throwing darts anyway. These guys all have some traits, but they've all got holes in them. So bring in a couple, maybe neither one works out. But if you hit on either one of these guys, Gabriel or Shedeur, you end up getting value, and maybe that extra first round pick you picked up in the Travis Hunter trade you can use on something else.
So that's interesting because Gabriel went on day two. Is there a theory out there that, hey, Stefanski, he likes Gabriel. The coach, the front office, they like Gabriel. But it was the owner who meddled and said, "Bring me the star, bring me Deion." So do you buy into that? Is that why maybe he took him in the fifth round?
My understanding is that was not a Jimmy Haslam pick. That was a
Mm,
classic position where a team, as they're looking at the board, and listen, it's not like when you draft, you just go straight down the list, right?
yeah,
Like there's times where whether it's a duplicate or, hey, you might have, the Chiefs could have had Cam Ward as the one player on their board, but even if they had the number one pick, they're probably not taking Cam Ward
right.
because they've got Patrick Mahomes. So there are times where you see it, where there's one name that's the outlier, and you're just like, God, if we've got I don't know exactly what their grade was. It was obviously lower than the grade they had on Dillon Gabriel, but let's say you got a second, third round grade on Shedeur Sanders and you're sitting there in the fifth, you're
Yeah,
like,
why
why
not?
wouldn't we just go get the guy? And
Mm,
that's my understanding on that one. I think you are correct in terms of Dillon Gabriel being the fit for Kevin Stefanski. That has Kevin written all over it. He was a part of the Minnesota team that had Case Keenum running around and making plays. You've seen other quarterbacks, Tua being a prime example, who are undersized but being able to play in that rhythm passing type of an offense. And Dillon Gabriel, he really showed something too to coaches at the Senior Bowl who are watching him on field level and
yeah,
going, "This guy, I mean, I was there. This guy is small. Like you see him, he's kind of thickly built, especially through the lower body, but he is a short man.
like a
But you
Russell
could
Wilson,
see
maybe.
I mean, Russ would get outside the pocket and make more things happen. With Dillon
Mm,
Gabriel, it's much more he's more like Tua, where a lot of what he does is going to be in the rhythm of the play. Russ was a run around and then throw the ball downfield. That was kind of his game.
mm,
Dillon Gabriel's been a highly productive. I mean, his numbers are unbelievable. He started more games, he threw for more yards than anybody else. That's more the play style with him. It's very Tua like. He's even left-handed. So that's probably a better fit for what Stefanski wants to do. But again, if you can get the buy-in from Shedeur, and if he can show, I don't think that anybody out there, no one I've talked to is like, well, Shedeur can't process. No, it's not that. It's just he was good enough and had enough freedom and latitude at Colorado that he could make those extended plays. In Cleveland, you're getting chased by much bigger, much faster men in the NFL. It's just going
mm.
to be harder for him to play like that. So let's see. Shedeur's got things he's got to clean up. He said that himself the other day. Of all the quarterback competitions we'll have in training camp, the best one
Oh,
is going to be in Cleveland. And again, it'll be interesting to see how they're dividing the reps, what order these guys even are going in through OTAs and minicamp to kind of figure out, okay, who's getting a real shot at this job and how are they going about trying to make as much of an apples to apples comparison as they can.
let me go to the Saints who took Tyler Shook, the kid from Louisville. That was a stunner. A, were you surprised by that? And B, like, there's no way he's a better prospect than Shedeur. I didn't see anyone have that on their, big board or what have you. That was a stunner to me.
I was not shocked by it. In fact, I was
Hmm.
on a show that afternoon and they asked me like, what's the wildest rumor that you've heard? And I said, well, I would say it's more than a rumor, but Tyler, the QB3 may not be Shedeur Sanders. It might not be Jalen Milrow, who's still in the green room. It's Tyler Shuck, because I knew that the Saints were really high on Shuck and they were not the only team. I had heard the Rams were really high on Shuck too. And maybe even somebody would try to trade up and take Shuck
What?
at the top of the second round. So the difference with Tyler Shuck, and when I talk about, the touch points, right, that are in the pre-draft process, and as much as Shedeur probably missed opportunities to take advantage of those, Tyler Shuck crushed the pre-draft process, which it's easy to see why. The guy's almost 26 years old. He was in college for 7 years. He was in a bunch of different offenses, played for a bunch of different coaches. And so when he's going in and they're testing him on the board, there's recall with everything. It's like, oh, I ran that concept in 2021 at
What?
Texas Tech. That reminds me of 2018 at Oregon when I'm backing up Justin
Right.
Herbert. And so he's a tall, he's 6'4". He's not, he's 200 plus pounds. He doesn't look like the biggest guy, but tall enough with enough arm. His run a pro style offense. Jeff Brom gave him a lot of responsibility at the line of scrimmage in that offense at Louisville, and he finally stayed healthy. The guy had never played. This is one of the
Yeah.
wildest stats in this draft. The first 6 years of Tyler Shuck's college career, he never played more than 7 games in any of those seasons. He
Come
was
on.
perpetually, he was a backup for 2 years. He had the COVID season at Oregon where he did lead them to a conference title. He had 3 years at Texas Tech, got hurt in all of them, then goes to Louisville and, puts it together and has a pretty good season. Now, there's also coaches who will say when they see this on tape, and I talked to several who said this, there's a little bit of flinch with him. You worry, is he shying away from contact? Is he trying not to get hit because he has been hurt so much? That's the
Mm.
number one drawback with Tyler Shuck. But he's your classic efficient, smart guy who knows a lot about offense. And he's arguably the guy who's the most ready to step in and play right now. And depending what happens with Derek
Wow.
Carr in New Orleans, you could end up having a Tyler Shuck competition with Spencer Rattler in New Orleans. And I wouldn't put it against Tyler Shuck
Jeez.
to be the 2025 week one starter for the Saints.
So maybe they're doing that to get Arch Manning with the number one pick, bring it full circle with the Manning family, right? Because I listen, I know you're saying nice things, Tom. This dude's not a starting NFL quarterback. I mean, he was in college for 7 years, and he was only a starter for like one full season. He just kept bouncing around because he wasn't good enough. I don't mean to be a hater. I'm sure you know his agent and stuff, but you watch the tape on
He
that guy,
went,
you're
it's
like,
not me and the agent. The Saints took him in the top of the second
I
round.
can't
He was
believe
the
that's
third
such a
quarterback
bad.
off the board.
Okay, so was that the worst quarterback pick in the draft? Be honest.
No, I don't think it was the worst quarterback pick. I mean, the way that I kept explaining this, and again, this goes back to, I don't like to crush,
Yeah, I know.
people in
These
the
are
media or
kids.
anything else, but like there was just this misconception that it was, well, it's Cam Ward versus Shedeur, and then it's everybody else. Like it was pretty apparent through the process, right, wrong, or indifferent. Okay, Jason, I don't watch a lick of tape. I don't watch these guys. I may have seen them on TV. Like
Mm,
I don't go through and like evaluate and take notes. I just call people
yeah.
because I know that ultimately I don't know what I'm looking at. I just ask people within the league, people who are in the quarterback market, people who are not. I try to get a blunt assessment and talk to people, just like lay it on me, not the press conference version, not the everybody's great version. Like give me the actual good and bad. And what became apparent was it was Cam Ward was the consensus number one on just about everybody's board. If you went to, there were a few people who had Shedeur as number two. There were a lot of people who had Jackson Dart as number two. There was real competition. It was stacked
Mm,
differently on everyone's board from Jackson Dart, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, and Tyler Shuck. Those were the next four. There were different orders for different people, which makes sense because think about it. You could not find more different quarterbacks than those guys. Jalen Milroe is a hellacious runner with a massive arm who's just not accurate right now. Tyler Shuck is a pure, at this point, pocket passer. He's a decent athlete, but he doesn't want to get out and run. They didn't use him that way last year. Who's been in a pro style offense. You know where his floor is, might be the highest, but the ceiling might be the lowest. You got
mm,
Shedeur, who's had all the hype on him. And again, very accurate, very tough, but has to play probably a different play style in the NFL. And then you got Jackson Dart, who's,
mm,
just kind of a bigger, more physical athlete. What I was told when I asked about the Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders for the Giants, because they were going through that all the way through. If you went back a year ago and told the Giants you're going to be sitting there in the first round and you can take one of these guys, I would think they probably would have said Shedeur Sanders.
yeah.
But what it came down to at Jackson Dart was he's bigger, he's got more athletic ability, probably played against tougher competition too in the
Mm,
SEC. But you think about Brian Dable, where he's had success. It was in Buffalo with Josh Allen. It was the first year in New York with Daniel Jones. These are like big physical
mm,
athletes. You can do RPO, you can do read options. You're not going to do that with Shedeur Sanders. They felt like Jackson Dart had more layers to his game. And so for it to go the way that it did, which was Dart being the second, Shuck being the third, I can't remember if Milroe or Gabriel was fourth. They were both late third round. But the fact that it was that order, the only surprise to me was Dylan Gabriel jumping up above and then
mm,
Shedeur going completely out of day two. Everything else, and you can go back. I mean, I
mm.
did the whole quarterback story and ranked all these guys.
Yeah.
It's like the 10 guys I said would get drafted, they all got drafted. There was a little bit of variance in the rounds, but I really didn't find it that surprising. And again, I think that the way that we talk about things at times, it just miscasts it. And, the fact that there was like this seeming debate in the media of is Shedeur the number one quarterback in this class? All I would tell you is if you went through, and I talked to dozens of people, maybe not all 32 teams, but easily over 20 teams. I did not find a single person who had Shedeur Sanders as the number one quarterback in this
Mhm.
draft. And it was hard even to find an unqualified positive opinion of Shedeur Sanders because some people really liked the player, but they just had reservations about the culture shock of coming in. What's it going to be like walking into a locker room where, for the first time in really his entire life, his dad is
Mhm.
not the coach? The accountability structure is going to be different. Or they were fine with the person and they enjoyed their interactions, but they're like, the player just isn't that great. It's not to say Shedeur can't be a starter in the NFL. I would just tell you the only guy, the consensus across the league that projected as a surefire starter was the guy who went number one. And after
Yeah.
that, it was, for lack of a better term, chuck a dart and figure out which one's going to go next.
So the only counter would be that I think you would even agree with this that the NFL has struggled badly, very badly in identifying quarterbacks and what works and what doesn't in the NFL over the last, I don't know, 15 years. When like Mitch Trubisky goes, what, third overall and Mahomes falls
And
and
he was the
Josh
consensus top
Rosen.
quarterback in that draft is the wild thing in 17. He was the
Yeah,
consensus
there's
top
just
guy.
so many I mean, Josh Rosen taking like 20 spots ahead of Lamar Jackson. Russell Wilson,
That's a
third
great okay.
round.
That's a great example, right? So let's go back to the 2018 draft because I think this is a really important point too that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not just the evaluation. It's easy to say, well, the scouts don't know what they're doing and they miss all the time. But think about the environmental factors of that 2018 draft, which nobody thought, by the way, was a good quarterback draft. Four of the five guys, I believe, went that were in that draft went to the Pro Bowl last year. But think about the routes they had to take. Baker Mayfield goes number one. That was a surprise at that time that the Browns were that high on him. He was below the line from a height perspective. There were all these questions about what kind of guy is he? Is he going to be a
It was
pain in
supposed
the
to be
ass and all
Darnold,
this
right?
stuff? What's that?
It was supposed to be Darnold, right?
Darnold was that was the one I had one in my
Yeah.
rankings, which I'm
Because
just trying to
I was
project for the
thrilled the
league.
Jets, fell to my Jets because then the second pick was
Right.
Saquon. And I was like, yes, victory. But, anyways, continue. Yeah.
Right. And there were, John Dorsey was the GM in Cleveland and he bought into it. He'd been around Favre in Green Bay and kind of that edge and that toughness. He felt like there was some of that with Baker. But Baker gets run out of Cleveland, gets replaced by Deshaun Watson, then goes to Carolina, doesn't work out there, gets traded to the Rams, has that wild game where 3 days later he starts and plays great, goes to Tampa on a 1 year, $5 million deal. Now he is, if not a top 10 quarterback, Baker Mayfield is certainly a top 20 quarterback in the NFL, solid starter on a team that keeps going to the playoffs. Number three pick is Sam Darnold, same thing. Wrong environment with the Jets. It's a disaster. You are well versed in how that one went, Jason. He ends up going to Carolina and to San Francisco. And then finally, the right place, right time in Minnesota. JJ
Mm.
McCarthy tears his meniscus in camp. I'm of the mind, based on everything I know, that Darnold was probably going to be the starter out of the gate last year anyway. But all of a sudden, he didn't have the pressure of the first round pick breathing down his neck. And he
Mm.
played great until the last game of the regular season and then the playoff game as well. But he revived his career. Josh Rosen never had a chance. He's in
Oh,
Arizona, and I'm not saying Josh Rosen would have been better than these guys, but he's in Arizona, and by like the third game of the season, they've decided these coaches suck. We're firing everybody, and the season is a mess. He gets traded the following April to Miami, ends up in another bad situation. Like it was a wreck. Josh Allen turns into the MVP. I believe
mhm.
he went eight in that draft, just
7 or 8.
ahead
Yeah,
of
7 or
Josh
8.
Rosen. But he was the guy everyone was going 57% completion percentage of
Yeah.
Wyoming. This guy stinks. He
Yeah, I
can't hit.
remember. Yeah.
But they ran the right offense for him, allowed him to use his athletic ability while they worked on the accuracy. And then 32 is Lamar Jackson, who there was real debate that year, and people were questioning, hey, can he work out at wide receiver or run the
Yeah. But
combine?
Napoleon, right?
That was a real debate within the league. And so you think about that, but like Lamar went into a spot in Baltimore where they had a clear vision. We are going to do the things he does best while he improves as a passer. And as soon as he graduated out of being a run first type of quarterback, and he's still an unbelievable runner, but once he became more accurate, they made an offensive coordinator change. They run an offense now that's a little more advanced. Same thing with Josh Allen. Once he got better as a passer, they ran the right offense. You had vision in those spots. Baker bounced around, Darnold bounced around, Rosen's completely out of the league. The quarterbacks that are going to succeed, it's not just the ones that, oh, that was the right evaluation. It was, what are we going to do with him here? How are we going to win with this guy? And we'll see how Tennessee uses Cam Ward. I mean, the comps that you hear on Cam Ward, it's Mahomes, It's Caleb Williams. It's a guy who just can change arm angles and run around and make plays. I heard somebody would compare him to Ben Roethlisberger, which I thought was really interesting because there's
Mm.
times you see Cam Ward getting hit in the pocket and just like shedding people and extending plays that way. He's not a scrambler. He's a guy who moves to throw. But listen, if they get itchy in Tennessee and God forbid they fire everybody, like what could that do to Cam Ward? I think everything's circumstantial. Everything's about what environment are these guys in. And that's where, that'll be the telltale sign on this quarterback class, which outside of Cam Ward, the NFL issued a
Yeah.
verdict that shouldn't have really surprised anybody, which was this is a one quarterback draft. And after that, we're just trying to get lucky.
It's interesting. I totally forgot that it was Dorsey who picked Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
What's his name? Dorsey. John Dorsey.
John Dorsey.
It's
Yep.
interesting. So I looked it up. It looks like Dorsey has not worked really since. He was a consultant somewhere.
He's with the Lions. He is in their front office. You can still find him wearing that same gray sweatshirt that he
Oh, a
wanted to wear.
senior
He's still
personnel
got one.
executive.
Yes.
Okay, there it
Yes.
is. Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. And again, this is kind of off the beaten path, but Dorsey actually was the GM when they drafted Patrick Mahomes. And then he was cut loose like a
Right.
few months later before Mahomes even played a game. Oh man, I
Right.
totally
In
forgot about that.
June, I believe.
Yes, June.
Yes.
Wow, good memory. So wait, so he doesn't get a lot of credit for Mahomes. That usually goes to Brett Veach and some others, huh?
Well, Andy Reid has said that Brett Veach was the one that was pushing Patrick Mahomes. I knew, I had Deshaun. I remember catching flack because I had Mahomes ahead of Deshaun Watson
That's
in the
right.
rankings that year. And what I was saying was, listen, like Mahomes really impressed people. Everyone's like, oh, it's this guy who's running the air raid. He
Yeah.
just, he's just a thrower. He's not a passer. Which, what the amazing thing about Patrick Mahomes, if not for, Patrick Mahomes walked so Cam Ward could run. If not for Patrick
Ah,
Mahomes, none of these guys who have these unorthodox throwing styles and are, throwing the ball across their body and sidearm and all that, that wasn't considered like a positive trait. Now it's taught. Every quarterback's coach teaches guys to make these, off-platform throws, as they call them, and change their arm angles and things. And you see every year, Caleb Williams, same thing. They train that in now because Patrick Mahomes is the modern quarterback. But when he was taken by the Chiefs, it did surprise some people. Like I remember specifically, I had the order of the quarterbacks right that year, but that was not the consensus opinion. It was Deshaun
yeah.
Watson was the winner at Clemson. He was going to be the next one off the board. But Mahomes, where he impressed people was he went in and when they put him on the board and stuff, again, because he's an air raid quarterback, everyone's assuming he doesn't know football. He was amazing in those
Yeah.
meetings. Like there were a bunch of teams that were hoping Patrick Mahomes was going to slip to them in that draft. In the end, the Chiefs went and got him, and the rest is history that's still being written here because Mahomes is still only like 30 and will probably win 5 more Super Bowls
Yeah,
before.
well, hey, come on, not five more, maybe one more. I think the Chiefs are in some trouble this year, but I'm sure you would agree. So hey, I'll wrap up
Listen,
with this.
they have
What's up?
shown a remarkable ability to
Yeah.
reinvent themselves. I mean, everybody thought when they traded Tyreek Hill, like, what are they doing? And they took the draft capital and the cap resources, rebuilt the defense, rebuilt the offensive line. Now they're kind of in another phase of that. As long as Mahomes is playing, this is like a Tom Brady level run in my mind, where it's like, okay, just pencil them in the AFC Championship game,
Oh,
see if they can win 2 more.
um, I'll go Buffalo in the Super Bowl this year out of the AFC. One last thing. It's way too early for this, but Fox Sports asked me to do a 2026 NFL mock draft. I just need your insight because you're obviously way on top of this.
Yeah.
So, like every single year, we say, "Oh, next year's quarterback, that's the
Mhm.
one. It's going to be loaded." So I went back and looked. Tom, I'm sure you remember this. A year ago, everybody was saying Quinn Ewers is probably going to go top 10. Carson Beck, Georgia, probably going to go top 10. And then as the season progresses, we start to weed guys out. But it seems like Arch Manning, people just cannot, because he's Manning, everybody's putting him at, hey, that's the guy next year. And I know you haven't done the work, and I'm sure people aren't talking to you about Arch Manning yet. But a
Well, they're
year
talking.
out,
They're talking.
are they talking about Arch?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean,
Oh,
people make just kind of glancing comments. They're not deep in the evaluation. There's not that much to evaluate. I mean, the guy
yeah,
has
he
not
barely
played.
started.
He hasn't played a whole lot there. I mean, think about this. If Arch Manning is the presumptive number one pick or whatever, projected number one pick for certain people in the
Yeah.
2026 draft, he essentially sat for 2 years behind a guy who just was a seventh rounder in Quinn Ewers, which tells you something about how much Steve
Mm.
Sarkisian had faith in Quinn Ewers. His slide was the one. If we weren't talking about Shedeur Sanders, we would have been talking about why in the world is Quinn Ewers going in the seventh round. The drawbacks on him was just not the biggest guy, not the biggest arm. He's been hurt every year going
Yep.
back to high school. But there's no arguing the guy has won. He went to the college football playoff twice. He
Yeah.
was 11-1 on the road. Him and Joe Burrow were the only ones who beat Saban over the last decade of Saban at Alabama. I mean, I don't know what more you can ask of Quinn Ewers. I thought he would go third, fourth, maybe fifth round because he's at minimum, this guy can come in and be your backup for the next 10 years. He goes in the seventh to
Yeah.
Miami. I mean, he may well beat out Zach Wilson. We'll see how that
He
competition shakes
may.
out,
Of
but
course he's going to beat
I
out
wouldn't
Zach
be surprised
Wilson.
at
Come
all
on.
if we see him backing up Tua. But back to Arch, I would say like, and this is one of the things too the coaches noticed when they dug into the Texas tape was like when you saw like if you're watching one of the Texas receivers, for instance, and all of a sudden the ball was like, man, that ball just jumped off his hand. Oh, that was Arch. That was Arch in place of Ewers. Like you could tell a difference when Arch was in the game. He's
Mm.
obviously got the athletic ability. He's a
Yeah.
better runner already than anybody in his family. At least Eli
Not
and
saying
Jason.
much.
I mean, he can move out there. Drew Aller from Penn State's another one that if
Mm.
he had come out, he quite possibly could have been QB2 in this
Wow.
draft. He decided to go back, so that's one that we're going to be watching. Carson Beck, if he hadn't, what did he do? He tore his UCL, right? I mean, it was a significant injury that he had at the end
Yeah.
of the season. Ends up transferring. We'll see. But you're
Hmm.
right. I mean, the quarterback position is the hardest one, and there's so
Let me
many
give you a name real
times.
quick. A name. You didn't mention him. So obviously Nico, who's at UCLA from Tennessee, he's
Mhm.
going to have a lot of questions about the departure. But do you know the name Lenoris Sellers,
I do though that name, yes.
South Carolina? I will
Yeah.
have him like top 6 in my mock. I'm
He
sure
is,
people haven't heard of him.
if I'm not mistaken, Lenora Sellers is trained by the same coach who trained Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders.
Ooh,
And
interesting.
so I had him on a show recently, and he brought that up and said this is one of the next guys, is this Lenora Sellers. Like he's going to be the next one who can do it. And so he's definitely on the radar as well. But I mean, you said it like you look a year out. And it's so hard to project these things. This is looked at as a better quarterback class in 26 than the one that we just had in 25. But the cautionary tale would be it's not just the Quinn Ewers or to go way back Brian Brom, who's a guy I've brought up for some of the comparisons to Shedeur Sanders, who it's like next guy could be the number one pick, and then he slides and then he's out of the league
Yeah.
in a few years. But Cam Ward was projected as like a fourth, fifth, sixth round pick. He declared for the draft, went back because everyone told him you're not going until day 3.
Mm.
Joe Burrow was projected as like a fourth, fifth round pick going into his senior year, his last year at LSU. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden he has one of the greatest seasons in college football history. The 1 year producer for so long, that's what scouts always refer to it as. It's always made people nervous because it's like, okay, what was going on that he didn't look like that? And then how did he make this leap? In other words, was that the real guy? And he just kind of caught fire. But now it's like with the way that players move around, sometimes it's a matter of just getting with the right coach in the right program. And God knows these guys are playing at 3 different schools. Like you're moving around enough that you're probably
Yeah.
playing for a bunch of different coaches. The guy who ends up being the number one pick or the number one quarterback in this draft may well be somebody we're not even thinking about. But will Arch Manning enter this coming season as the presumptive number one pick? I think it's fair to say, and again, this is not from a scouting perspective because NFL teams haven't fully dug into this, but I would say he will enter this season with as much, if not more, hype than any player who has not previously been a starter that we've ever seen.
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah.
can't think of
Okay.
anybody else with that. Maybe Jimmy Clausen, who entered with
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
that much hype, and hopefully it'll work out better for
Jeez.
Arch than it did for
Yeah.
Jimmy.
Wow. All right, Tom Pelissero, great stuff. NFL Network. Listen, man, you're a fountain of information. Love it. And congrats. Now get some rest, man. Ease up. Summer's here for you.
But we still got the insiders 5 nights a week, every weeknight,
Oh.
7 p.m. Eastern time, only on NFL Network with me. So
All
I'll
right,
be
buddy.
there. Thanks,
Take it
man.
easy.